Hi, Richard. I'd like to welcome you to DJ's Denim and Leather on the Crew Rock Radio, and thank you for taking time to speak to me.
Well, hello there. Yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, am I correct? The Demon Pact story starts towards the end of the 70s, started by yourself and your brother Alan.
Absolutely, yes. It was our kind of bedroom antics, guitar-wise, and kind of little dream really to have a band, put a band together at some point. That kind of started it. If anything, my brother Alan was slightly more instrumental in kind of pushing for it before we had the band, of course, than I was probably. I already played with music with a number of other people, played in a couple of covers bands and did all sorts of things. So it wasn't kind of completely alien to me.
Right, okay.
Although I was a huge Black Sabbath fan, I like music in general. I didn't really kind of fall into any one. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't my intention to set out to be a rock guitarist in any way. I just like playing guitar. So, there was other stuff I did. Hence the reason why, which will probably lead on to how we all met,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I've originally read that you wanted to be a drummer initially. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say I wanted to be a drummer. I actually played guitar. I played a bit of piano because we had a piano at home. But when I was at school, I actually learned how to play the drums. And I played in the school orchestra, bizarrely enough, as a drummer. It wasn't... I just enjoyed it. I wasn't very good, I have to be honest about that. But, I could... that was more of my foray into bands initially, or playing initially, was playing the drums, yeah.
Right, okay. And was the band originally called Fenris Wolf?
Yeah, that was my brother, really.
Right.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Okay.
After the mythical beast, yeah.
So, early rehearsals then, that took place in your garage at the family home, I believe. I think the neighbours were probably happy about that.
Well, we didn't do too much of that. There were a few.
Well, there's a lot of bands did,
That's often the way it starts, isn't it? You get your first amp and you can't play that indoors. You're going to have to go outside, and you go outside, you can't play that outside. Upsetting everyone. Come back indoors,
Well, yeah.
I'm sure a lot of musicians have seen that over the years.
Well, absolutely. So, how did the band sort of start to come together then?
Well, I think I'd left school, and at the end of that, a particular year, there was a kind of review on at school, and I think that they were sort of short of people to play or put some stuff together. And my brother kind of asked me, said, could you play guitar on this for us? Could you write a track at the end for the end of this review thing we're doing? Mm. And I said, what sort of thing do you want? And they kind of asked for something Bee Geesy like, disco like, which of course in 1978 and that kind of era was obviously just, almost as popular, if not more so, mainstream wise than heavy metal was,
Yeah.
So we ended up doing a song called Disco Baby, of all things. And Donald, along with two girls, one of whom I met and later became my wife, but it's another story, called Sally James, and Donald Meckiff were the backing vocalists. So that's kind of how we met Donald. Donald was in the same class as my brother at school.
Yeah.
Donald was a kind of avid biker and punk fan and new wave of British heavy metal fan as well as it developed. And of course, there we were, and the lead singer of that was also in a punk band called Case, a guy called Matthew, I've forgotten his surname now, but Case were kind of around for some years as well, quite well known in Croydon, Bromley area. Mm. And he sang it, and the song was called Disco Baby, which I believe there's recordings of that knocking about somewhere. But and Phil Wickenden was the drummer, so that kind of how we met. And we were asked to do an end of school kind of gig, which included a smattering of covers. I think it was about 5 or 6. And then after a sort of quick counting, we launched into kind of, a couple of our own songs, which pretty much cleared the room, if I remember rightly. and brought a number of complaints from the neighbours, you know. And that was in a village hall somewhere, I think in Eden Park somewhere. I've got a sneaky suspicion it was opposite Kevin Hayborn's house, but we won't go into that.
Oh, right, okay.
Because he lived in Eden Park.
Right.
Anyway, that's another story. But, that was pretty much how we met each other.
Right.
Obviously, Phil Wickenden, we actually rehearsed it initially in Phil Wickenden's attic in Beckenham. But he wasn't, you know, he enjoyed the cover side and the sort of gentle rock side, but wasn't really raucously into heavy metal. So, you know, in any way, shape, sense, or form. Whereas the other three of us, of course, were definitely heading down that route. You know.
Yeah.
As Fenris Wolf, you know, at the time.
Right. So you were still Fenris Wolf at that point then.
Well, I believe so. Yeah. I, you know, as I say, we're talking late 70s here, so I'm pretty sure. If the timeline serves me correctly, or my memory serves me correctly, that end of year party was actually 78.
Right. Okay.
And we kind of shelved things for a while because we had no drummer.
Right. Okay.
Until the following summer, when we kept talking about doing stuff and sort of didn't. Then a young lad in Bromley, Arthur Nad, who just left school and started working at the Sonar factory. But, you know, he turned up, he had double bass drums, various other bits and pieces. They're all different colours, but of course, as he rightly pointed out, the intention was to strip them down to the bare maple and varnish it, which he absolutely did, and it was a stunning looking kit, as the photos that are knocking about will attest, you know, double bass drum. So between him and Donald, they were kind of our stage presence, and, you know, for a band with not much else to go for, that was kind of a major thing at the time, you know. A drummer with a massive kit and a frontman who filled the stage entirely.
Well, yeah. We're obviously talking about Ian Finlay then there, yeah?
Yes, of course, yes.
Yeah.
Young Ian, yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel that sort of, with him coming into the lineup then, it's sort of, like you've just said, it cemented the lineup?
Oh, yeah, we had a great time. You know, we've kind of, well, I firmly believe there was a little bit of spark of magic going on there, you know.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it was, as I say, it was a bit sad that Donald didn't see it in the same way and saw it more of a kind of, you know, something to mess about with while he did his A-levels, you know.
Right, okay.
And didn't see it in any serious shape, sense or form, you know. And I think that was a bit unfortunate, you know. But who knows?
Well, yeah. And again, this is only what I've read.
Yes.
You changed the name to Orion for maybe 24 hours. That's whether.
Well, again, I'm shocked that you even know that. It was a name that was kind of suggested. I have no idea why it's suggested. It's probably my brother again. And what's even funnier is that the name Demon Pact was settled on, and none of us liked that one. We thought it had to be the right name, you know. That nobody makes a pact with the devil. That's just terrible, you know. But then again, people might just remember it, you know. So I think that's partly why that ended up like it was.
Well, yeah.
It may well have had more to do with the influence of girlfriends than it did. Well, you know, that's an evil name. There, let's stick with that, you know. And also, we had a song called Demon Pact, or it was originally Pact with the Devil, but it ended up being called Demon Pact for the same reason, you know.
It was the first gig at the Star in Croydon, spring 1980.
Well, actually, the first gig was in October or November 79 at the Woodville Halls in Gravesend.
Okay.
And it was put on, and I believe it was put on by the chap who owned the White Witch Records thing, whose name escapes me. But he was a bit of a fan of the band.
Well, that actually leads me on quite nicely to the next question. You had a track Escape released on Kent Rocks, which led to releasing your own single Eaten Alive. What was your recollection of the release? Well, both releases, really.
Well, as I say, White Witch Records was the Kent Rocks, and he was kind of either he was in the audience at Gravesend, or maybe it could well have been the case that he was just searching for local bands in that genre to kind of put on the album to make money.
Yeah.
And we were a kind of easy target. The thing I remember about that release, and obviously when we came to do our own single, was Paul Peltier, who kind of assisted and made sure that everything kind of happened, and was hugely instrumental in even in the band's first single. Actually, and because we were signed Act at that point in terms of publishing, went round to White Witch Records and confiscated all the LPs on account of the fact they hadn't paid their PRS,
Oh, right. Okay.
Which I always remember as being highly amusing, because we all ended up with like hundreds of copies of Kent Rocks, And I thought, well, that's not very good, because that, as I did point out to him after he'd done SMS, surely we should have let him sell them, because it promotes the band inadvertently, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
Well, he said, well, we're not a charity,
So we'll have a listen to our first piece of music then, Richard. Could you just tell us what it is, please?
I think it's going to have to be our first release, Escape.
you then, after Kent Rocks, brought out the Eaten Alive single.
Yeah.
What was the recording of that like?
Well, we did 4 tracks at Rabbit Hole Studios with a chap called Pete Leggett, I think his name was.
Right.
In Shellsfield Village, in the sort of wildish Kent countryside. I kind of sparked my interest in recording, actually, because that's sort of something I've ended up, I'm sitting in front of a pair of Genelecs at the moment in my own little studio, so that was where it all started for me in terms of music and my career in the music business.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So there were 4 tracks recorded, all live in the little studio there. I wouldn't say I was hugely happy with it, but I was impressed with the ease at which it could be done, and also I was quite pleased that we'd rehearsed enough to not, do you know what I mean, to not mess it up and get it in a take or two, So I thoroughly enjoyed it, actually, and it kind of, I ended up going back and redoing 2 of them and adding solos and various other bits, which I believe was Raiders and Demon Pact themselves. I may well have added stuff to the other ones, but I didn't actually. I don't think I kind of sat in a studio with Pete and went through the finer details of how to mix or create a mix, which was hugely interesting to me at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
As I say, as a result of that, there were a few other bands around that time who kind of came to me and said, "Oh, how'd you get that sound? How did you do that?"
Oh, that's
one of whom was Raw Deal, who we sort of went into the studio with.
Yeah.
And did various bits. But anyway, that was kind of that was the interest for me, the 4 tracks were sparked enough of an interest. Well, one of them ended up, as I say, on the White Witch Records release. I think we may well have actually pushed that recording forward specifically for that purpose,
Right, yeah.
And they were definitely, that first demo, it was definitely 1979. It was kind of before we'd really actually started getting more gigs, because in those days you could book a gig, but it was probably 2-3 months down the road,
Yeah.
Nothing was ever,
No.
you can do one next week kind of thing, or 2 weeks' time. It was always well ahead of the game, and especially music pubs, because there's so many bands wanted to play and so few places to play,
Yeah, absolutely.
as is often the case in this country.
Mm.
So those are kind of my recollections. We went back into the studio, same studio I might add, with Pete to do the single when it was suggested that we did a single. And I kind of said at the time, well, if we're going to do a single, then we need to produce, I need to write something specifically, more attention grabbing and more catchy and a bit quicker, and rather than the more kind of epic-y numbers that we were doing in the sort of Black Sabbath-y style that, from a heavy metal point of view, I love Tony Iommi's guitar. I loved his sound. And I seem to, my playing seemed to reproduce that kind of sound quite easily. So, I was people often said to me, you sound a bit like Black Sabbath, from a guitarist point of view, not from a vocal point of view, obviously, or indeed from a drumming point of view. But, the guitar sounds for sure. And it was a huge influence, as was Richie Blackmore,
Well, yeah, they certainly were.
At the time.
Yeah. Okay, well, have a listen to another track now then.
Okay.
Could you just tell us what it is then, please, Richard?
I think it's going to have to be Eaten Alive.
You are the butcher, it's 3 hands back, so you never thought that. She's sour, she's human, she's power, she's food. You're sick, you make her sick.
The 2001 club, Erith Kent gig.
Yeah,
I believe it
that's
was.
what it's called, is it? 2001 Club. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that was an interesting show.
Well, it was just one of them funny things where we've been booked, and blatantly the name is Demon Pact, and we've turned up, and there's a DJ and a disco there, and I'm also sneakily suspicious that it was the day that Marvin Gaye was shot, but I could be completely wrong.
Right.
Or somebody died on that day that was sort of big in the disco scene, or could have been even reggae actually. Yeah. But anyway, so there was a lot of people going, well, you share to play other things, which is vaguely amusing at the time, and I'm sure many bands have kind of that's occurred to them.
Yeah.
And we just found it immensely amusing, especially as the pub we were in was kind of noted as a heavy metal pub, or rock pub. But clearly not every night. Well, during the week it was. At the weekends it had discos on. But I mean, that's just typical, isn't it?
Miscommunication, somewhat.
You got to laugh. But it's the only time it happened. I mean, pretty much everywhere else we played.
Yeah.
Was rock orientated, or at least they knew who the hell we were,
So your brother Alan leaves the band then, Richard. Could you give me a few details around that?
Yeah, he it was a kind of mutual thing. I mean, Alan's a superb musician, and it was a great loss, to be honest. But he had kind of issues with timekeeping and the like. So it was becoming a little unreliable. There was reliability issues with turning up for various things on time or holding us up in other areas, and it just became it's just unfortunate. In hindsight, it probably should have never happened, but back in those days I was a little bit more hot-tempered and kind of had slightly less tolerance towards that kind of thing, because it's something I've never been guilty of. So okay. Maybe again I took it all a bit too seriously when I should have kind of let certain things slide,
Yeah.
So that's really, it was a kind of mutual thing, really. Although in hindsight or in latter days, Alan didn't see it that way, but and also in hindsight, it was the beginning of the end, if you like, because being a key songwriter and a founding member, it was and the founding member rather.
Yeah.
It was a bit unfortunate,
Mm. Okay.
But that's brothers for you.
But so kind of Roy was in. However, Donald, as a result of that, because obviously he'd been to school with my brother, found it all a bit distasteful, and accused me of taking everything way too seriously, and promptly left.
Right, that's how Donald left.
And then Roy turned around and said, "Well, if he's left, then that is the band. That's why I turn up to see the gigs. I'm going then."
Right, okay.
So that was the end of that, really. It's amazing how the knock-on effects of these things. But who knows what might have happened if Donald had taken himself a tad more seriously for his art, which he was a superb performer, and if Alan had turned up on time,
yeah.
and if I had taken it all far too seriously,
Well, yeah, I mean, you answered my next question, really, because obviously, it's document Donald leaves the band, and obviously Roy did as well. There was a vocalist coming called Mark Maxwell, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good friend of mine. Funny enough, I'm just working on a couple of his songs. We still write together and do stuff, actually.
Right, okay.
After 40 odd years, yeah. He's a nice chap, Mark. We've been good friends for years. We right from Demon Pact days. Obviously, he wasn't so much of a fan of Demon Pact himself, because we kind of met him me and my brother started going to the Saxon Tavern in Downham area of Bromley, you know.
Right, okay.
But yeah, we became good friends, and he may have even been to a gig, I'm not sure, to be honest, prior to that. But there was a bit of a gap. I mean, after everybody kind of split up, there was a little bit of a lull where we didn't really do anything. And after I realised that Mark was quite a good vocalist, I said, you know, well, why don't we try doing something? I don't think the idea was really to resurrect Demon Pact as such, but it was convenient that, you know, we still had interest to go out and play Demon Pact songs. So, but obviously it wasn't quite the same, you know. Mark be the first one to admit that he wasn't that kind of, didn't have that sort of manic stage presence, you know. So that's what we did, really. And there was a chap called Paul, a local guy whose surname escapes me, who was a really good bass player and a good-looking lad as well. And the girls loved him, actually. But so we went out and did a couple of gigs, but it kind of never really, do you know what I mean? Yeah. It wasn't Demon Pact, and it certainly didn't seem to work in the same way, you know. And me and Ian sort of said, it is not the band, you know. Yeah. So we kind of did other things. We, funny enough, me and Ian kept in contact for a while. We played in a couple of other bands as well, but and as you know, Ian went on to be a professional drummer and was out in Germany for some years. So. Yeah. Donald, funnily enough, I sent a message to last night, actually, because he lives in America. Right. And we still send messages to each other now and again. I mean, we're not close buddies or anything, but we do stay in contact. And he's kind of fairly philosophical about all this, because of course he's been interviewed and asked about things, you know. Yeah. And he has said to me on occasion, he says, "It's funny, isn't it? The one thing I never took seriously and kind of dismissed as never going to go anywhere is possibly the legacy I'll be remembered for in a bizarre way."
Well, yeah. I mean, I have had a chat. I had a little messenger chat with Donald some time ago.
Did you really?
And he said he did say to me, you know, he said, you know, you ought to speak to Richard. And I'm just glad that you've agreed to speak to me. That's brilliant, Richard.
No problem at all.
So again, this is all off research sort of. Was the last gig an all-day gig with Deep Machine?
Yeah.
Deep Machine, Nothing Fancy, that ultimately became Terraplane, then Thunder.
Well, they were. I think you'll find they were Terraplane before, changed their name to Nothing Fancy, and then changed their name to Thunder.
Right. Okay.
When we used to play at the White Swan in Deptford, they were a kind of regular. They used to come and see us, Danny and Luke. Used to come and see us quite a lot, and obviously I bumped into them a few times, you know, over the years as a result of being in the business, you know, and said hello. And they're nice guys. I mean, you know, have always stayed really down to earth, you know, very approachable. You know, and I've kind of, you know, followed their career at arm's length, but with keen interest, because you know, obviously I knew them when they started out, bizarrely enough. Okay. As we all knew a lot of bands, you know, including as once was Samson, from which Bruce came from, of course, you know. Yeah. There's a couple of others we played on the same bill as well over the years, mainly at the White Swan and a place in Gravesend, its name escapes me, and a couple of other places. Anyway, yeah. Right. Funnily enough, I played in a band with Clive Burr came up and played with us, as did a friend of mine, Luke Howard, who was in a band called Orr, who played on the same circuit as us. Yes, he ended up in Tapau, Dean. Oh, was that Dave Boyce on bass with them? I think that name rings a huge bell, Dave Boyce. Yeah. Yeah, he played bass with Orr. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yes, I do know them. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, right, okay. I believe Atomic Rooster was on that bill as well, according to what I've got. They were, yeah. I'm pretty sure it was Atomic Rooster that might have been headlining it. Yeah. Possibly. They're definitely, I can confirm that the Ilford Palais All Dayer was the last Demon Pact gig, or the last time Demon Pact went out as Demon Pact, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Under that name. Okay, we'll have a listen to the third track then.
Richard, can you tell me what it is then, please?
I think we're going to have to go with Raiders, one of the first songs we ever recorded, and the B-side of the single.
West side of town, troubles of pity, when your head hits the ground, shattering glass, fists flying high, you're one of the raiders, so am I. Look out for the raiders, coming through the skies. Look out for the raiders, don't ask them why. From the night, cold air is waiting for the night. Down it descends, removing the mind. Powering the raiders, they're one of a kind. Look out for the raiders, coming through the sky. Look out for the raiders, don't ask them why.
Now then, I have got one question. I ask every single person that I've interviewed, so it is my sort of defining question, really.
Yes.
Have you got anything you'd like to say to the fans out there of Demon Pact?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much. I mean, for keeping us, alive, so to speak, and for keeping the faith, really. I mean, as I say, I'm sometimes a little bit in awe of the amount of interest there is in the band after all these years. And funnily enough, we've also, somebody did about 12, 13 years ago try to offer us some gigs to get back together again, and we've never actually ruled that possibility out, but getting all the original. And funnily enough, my brother lives around the corner from me, so we are kind of. In fact, I'm seeing it. He's going to be here tomorrow. But that chance you never know your luck or bad luck, depending on which way you look at it.
Well, it'd be wonderful. It'd be wonderful if you did.
But yeah, we have been asked, and Donald definitely didn't rule it out. He said, I'd come over and do a gig if it was a kind of one-off gig at a festival or something. We only had to get up and do the 5 tracks we can put our fingers on, and remember. Then I'd be up for it. It's just a question of whether we can track down Ian, because I've no idea where he is these days. If we could find him, and ironically, he should be the easiest one to find, because he, as I say, he's been a professional musician and drummer, and actually ended up in a number of big German heavy metal bands. So I don't think he would be that difficult to find.
No. But
of course, how seriously he'd want to take that, I don't know. He's got other career highlights that far supersede, far outweigh what we did. So,
Never say never.
Never say never. I've always said never say never.
Well, Richard, I'd like to thank you for taking time out to speak to me on DJ's Denim and Leather, and wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Darren.
Thank you.
Very nice talking to you. And thank you to your listeners.